We are very pleased with the quality of the keynote speakers that we've been able to provide you for this particular conference. All three of them are nationally recognized, nationally known for the work that they do in the field of teacher evaluation systems and teacher effectiveness. Our first keynote today is Charlotte Danielson. Most of you are probably familiar with Charlotte's work. You've heard of her in your careers in education and the work that she's done for many years around teacher evaluation systems. She is an internationally recognized expert in the areas of teacher effectiveness. She specializes in the design of teacher evaluation systems that look both at ensuring teacher quality but also at promoting professional learning for teachers. We're not just looking at evaluating, also at their professional learning and using that information from the evaluation to do that. She's worked with state departments of education, foreign and domestic departments of education, and national ministries. Charlotte is in high demand as a keynote speaker, and so we are very pleased that she was able to fit us into her schedule and to be here with all of you so that she might be able to speak to you and help to guide your work in teacher effectiveness and teacher evaluation systems. And I'm going to turn it over to Charlotte.
It's really nice to be here, and I feel privileged to be in this position to help you work on your systems. This is really hard work. But you know, what cracks me up about it is 15 years ago, I mean, who knew that teacher evaluation would ever be important? That's been a big surprise. I discover I've become a noun. And actually, what's even worse, I've become a verb. And a passive verb at that. So it's not all good. But it is interesting, and I mean, it's kind of scary too, because this work can be badly done also. And that's, of course, my worry. But let's just dive in and let's figure out how to do it well. And let me just say also, I have some stuff I want to offer to you, but I will pause at a couple times for some dialogue and conversation. But I would also urge you, if something comes up that doesn't sound right to you, or you have a question, jump in. Because if you have a question or a comment that's, you know, we're getting to later, I can monitor that stuff. But I don't want to have you sitting there with stuff sort of festering. And I'd also just like to introduce my colleague, Stephanie Height, who's at the back table, waving. She's come with me, and I have to leave about lunchtime today, so she's going to pick up and meet with the state groups that I won't have a chance to, but she'll be great. Okay, let's get in. Robin mentioned about how complex teaching is and how demanding, and I think the best statement of this, oh, and by the way, I didn't send these slides, is that right? They're on this computer, so you all can have them. So don't feel you have to like write everything. Not that you would anyway, but you don't even have to be tempted. But anyway, I think honestly the best statement of this is from Lee Schulman. And let's just read this together. He says, after 30 years of doing such work, I've concluded that classroom teaching is perhaps the most complex, most challenging, and most demanding, subtle, nuanced, and frightening, I don't love that word, activity that our species has ever invented. The only time a physician could possibly encounter a situation of comparable complexity would be in the emergency room of a hospital during or after a natural disaster. I love that. I think it's actually also true. I mean, if you just think about this a second, a doctor, I mean, that's complex work, no doubt about it. But you know, they see their patients one at a time. That would be tutoring. We don't get to do that. We don't get to do that. So I think we need to think hard about what this enterprise is and to acknowledge right up front that when you're talking about evaluating teacher effectiveness, promoting and supporting teaching, you're talking about enormously complex work. It does not lend itself to checklists, trivialized cookbooks, any of that. It's really complex work. So it's everything that I'm going to talk about today is in that context. So let's just think for a second about why we do this. Right? And you might say, well, we got laws. Okay, yeah, why are there laws? The first and most probably compelling reason has to do with ensuring quality. Now, I consider this non-negotiable. We are public schools. We take public money. The public has a right to expect good teaching, period, full stop. And there's almost nothing more to say about it than that. You might actually argue that in private schools it's worse, There they take people's money directly. It's not even mediated through the tax system. But I mean, the point's the same. It's other people's money to address and to assist with their most precious resource, which is their children. And so it's a trust. It's in this case, a public trust, and we've got to do it well. Any superintendent, any commissioner of education, but at the district level, has to be able to say to his public at any moment that everybody who teaches here is good, and here's how we know. We have a system. Okay? But now we're educators. We have bigger aims. We also want to be able to promote professional learning. Excuse me. So now, when I say that, I don't say that because I think that teaching is of poor quality and has to be fixed. That's not it, actually, at all. It's that teaching is so hard that it's never perfect. By definition, actually, right? No matter how, because of the complexity of it, right? No matter how good a lesson is, it could always be a little bit better. Okay, that's true. And so that, therefore, a professional obligation of every teacher as a member of any profession is to be engaged in a career-long quest to improve practice. Okay, I think these are sort of the ground rules here. Now, you might say, and you'd be right, by the way, that these two things, they're both important and they are really different from each other. And that would be true. That is, a system to ensure quality has to be rigorous, it has to be robust, it's got to be valid, reliable, defensible, professionally defensible, maybe even legally defensible. Whereas, and those are a lot of hard-sounding things, right? Now, a system to promote learning is likely to be more collegial, more collaborative, sort of softer. So how on earth do we achieve them both? Now, we have a history as a profession, as you probably realize, of trying to combine them both, primarily through enhancing the skills of the people who do the evaluating. That is, clinical supervision, cognitive coaching, etc., right? Which is fine. Those are good things to do. I don't think those are bad things to do. I just don't think they're sufficient. In my view, the way to merge these two purposes is in the design of the system itself. And I hope that in the next hour, I can persuade you that that's possible to do. We know it is, by the way. Got plenty of research now on that. The challenge is how, okay? Now, let me also point out something I'm sure you know. Of these two purposes of teacher evaluation, the public, and therefore school boards, and therefore legislators, they care only about the first. As a parent, I'll be honest with you, I care only about the first. Right? I mean, I don't really care that a certain teacher will be good next year. My kids are there now. It's got to be good. It's got to at least be good enough. And so, actually, in a nutshell, that becomes the crux of the matter. To answer a few questions here. How good is good enough? Good enough at what? How do we know? It's the evidence question, right? And who should decide? I mean, the big ideas are actually pretty simple, right? How good is good enough? Good enough at what? How do we know? And who should decide? Now, you get down into the weeds, and it gets kind of complicated. But the big ideas are not hard. They are not hard. So, all right. So let's look at this one other way and say, now, in any sort of evaluation system, certainly teacher evaluation, there are two dimensions. There's the rigor, and there's level of stakes, right? And by stakes, of course, I mean, are there consequences? Are there consequences to the decisions? Okay, well, so if you have two dimensions, you obviously then can have 4 quadrants, and we can fill in some blanks. National Board Certification, Praxis 3, which is an ETF system for licensing, used in Arkansas, by the way. Those would be, and there's others, but those would be high stakes, high rigor. There are plenty of, there are some, not plenty, but some high stakes, low rigor, such as the new Teacher Center Santa Cruz model for mentoring, right? It's good and focused and rigorous, but it's not consequential. It's mentoring, okay? And then others like that. There are plenty of low stakes, low rigor, and I'm afraid I'm blocking this for some people, so let me sort of move around a little bit. Informal mentoring. Traditional evaluation systems have been low stakes, low rigor, but low stakes, like nothing ever really happened, right? We learned that in the widget effect. But the ones I worry about are high stakes, low rigor. And I do worry that if we don't do this well, that's where we're headed. And you know, there are moments when I think it's not going to end well either. That if a teacher is dismissed or denied tenure or some consequential action based on a terrible system, you could forgive that person for suing. And you could forgive the system for them winning. And in a way, they should win. Because this is when it's high stakes work, you've got to get it right. You've absolutely got it right. So what does it mean to get it right? Okay? Well, excuse me. Okay, what does it mean to get it right? Well, first thing we have to do is be really clear about what we're evaluating. What are the evaluative criteria? Now, I have to just tell you a very brief anecdote. When I was first teaching, I think it was 5th grade, I was introducing a new science unit in buoyancy and density. Okay. Oh, thank you. This is a tilted table. Buoyancy and density. Okay, related to sinking and floating. Nice topic. The kids had pushed their desks together to make tables. On each table was a tub of water, sort of a dishpan size, you know, that kind of thing. Now, I don't need to tell you, I was never the most popular teacher with the custodial staff. Things kept happening in my room. But anyway, this day was fine. The kids pushed it. Each child had a lump of clay, which they had weighed. We had a little pan balance in the room. They had weighed. They were satisfied they had roughly the same amount, right? Same mass. They put it in the water, and of course it sank, like instantly, right? Their challenge was to make it float, which they discovered they could do if they fashioned it into a boat shape. Now, it didn't take them long to first of all discover they could do that, and secondly, to set themselves the next challenge, which was, can I make a good boat? Good, defined as one that would hold a lot of cargo in the form of paper clips before it sank. That's what we had available, right, for weights. Well, so then they were exploring questions like, should it have thin sides or thick sides? Thin gives you more enclosed volume for amount of material. Should it be shaped more like a bowl or more like a canoe? Bowl, same reason. Canoes are for rapids. So they were designing these boats, seeing how many paper clips they'd hold, and drawing pictures on the board of their designs. And they got really good, actually. I mean, they were, you know, here's one 14, 27. They got up over 50. They were making boats with paper-thin walls. And anyway, it was great. Now, the next day, we got into more typical, you know, topics in buoyancy, like displacement and whatever. But this was the introductory workshop, just sort of for them to see what the problems were. In the middle of this, principal came to the door to do an observation, obviously an unannounced observation. He took one look at his scene, and he pulled me aside, and he said, I'll come back when you're teaching. Well, now, we clearly didn't agree on what was good teaching. Well, we evidently didn't agree on what was teaching, right? Good or bad. But here's the reason I'm telling you this story. I never knew. I never did know. And there was no system in that school or district to ever find out. Well, that's a bizarre situation. I mean, it really is. And in fact, I've heard from so many people, not so much recently, but say 5 or 10 years ago, when the framework book was first out, they said, oh, thank God, now I know what my principal's looking for. And in fact, I had a conversation with a man who I did some work with who's very well known in the area of supervision. I asked him at one point, when you go in to observe a class, what do you take with you? I mean, do you take some sort of instrument or form, I don't know, anything? And he said, oh, no, just a blank pad and a pen, I guess. And I thought about that. I mean, I thought, you know, I'm interested in that. I'm guessing that although you take a blank pad into the classroom, you don't take a blank head. Like, you're looking for some things, right? Why not tell them? Is this a secret? Is it a mystery? Right? So, I mean, okay, I don't want to belabor this point. I'm just saying this is assessment 101. You don't ever evaluate people on things that they don't know what they are, period. So, and there are other reasons to do that as well, which we'll get into. Okay, then there's, of course, levels of performance. And by that I simply mean that we've had definitions of good teaching around for a while. They have tended to be lists of things. Now, that's better than not having lists. But it's not really sufficient because it's not a toggle switch. It's not as though teachers either do them or don't do them. No, they do them well or poorly. So then the challenge is, well, what's well? What does that look like? How do you know? So that's why we need levels of performance to describe practice at different levels of skill, expertise, and so on. Then there's, of course, an issue of weighting. Are they all equally important? My framework has 22 components. Are they all equally important or no? Probably not. But that's an interesting conversation to have. There's no right answer to it, I'm sure you realize. But so therefore the question is the answer to that question the same if you're talking about high school teaching or primary, or if you're talking science versus literacy, or you're thinking an experienced teacher compared to a newbie, right? And so that's a very interesting, or the beginning of the school year compared to the end of the school year. Right? That is a fruitful discussion to have. Where do we start? What's most important? Because, I reminded at the very beginning, this is enormously complex work. It's hard to do it all at once, especially if you've never done any of it very rigorously before. And so, okay, so what is it? So where do we start? And that's the reason for weighting. Then there's an issue that the measurement people would call score combining, which is simply this, that let's suppose you're an evaluator and you're making an important personnel decision, say a tenure decision or just a consequential judgment about practice. Now you may have done, over the course of several years, I don't know, 6, 8 observations of teaching. You may have some artifacts, you will have had some conferences, you will have feedback from parents of students in that teacher's classroom, you'll see them interacting with their colleagues, you'll see how they interact with students, not only in their own classroom, but in the lunchroom, etc. Right? You have a lot of what the measurement people would call data points. Now, in the end, if you're the evaluator, you have to make a single judgment. It's called yes or no. So how do you take all those data points, you may have 100 of them, combine them into a single judgment? Now, obviously, it's related to weighting, okay? But there's another issue as well, which I think we can only call compensation, and it's got nothing to do with money. It's this: does really good performance in some aspect of practice compensate for poor performance somewhere else, or no? Again, there's no right answer to that, right? But you got to think about it. Like, or does performance have to reach a certain level, no matter for everything, each thing, regardless of the overall picture? So that's the score combining question. And then, of course, there's the final issue of just plain standard setting. How good is good enough? And is the answer to that question the same for a first-year teacher as it would be for someone who's been teaching 10 or 15 years? Probably not. Well, okay, then what is it? What is it? All right, so that's the what side. Now, let's talk for a minute about the how side. What are the procedures? How do teachers demonstrate their skill? I cannot imagine a system of teacher evaluation that did not include observations of classroom practice. I can't imagine a good system that relied exclusively on observations of classroom practice for the simple reason that not everything important to teaching happens in the classroom. In my framework, all of Domain 4 is important. That's behind the scenes work, as is Domain 1, planning and preparation, right? And yet it's critical to good teaching. And in Domain 4, you see none of it in the classroom. Communicating with families, maintaining records, being part of a professional community, all of those professional obligations. Domain 1, which is the planning and preparation, you sometimes do see some indirect evidence in an observation, but that's what it is, it's indirect, and you have to infer it. So, okay, so then the question is, okay, how is it that teachers demonstrate their skill? What is it? What are the procedures? There will be some observations, there may be some other things as well. You might ask teachers to assemble a little portfolio of some artifacts that reflect how they do professional growth, for example, how they communicate with families. And I can only say that the conversations around those collections of artifacts are very rich and a tremendous opportunity for dialogue, communication, and growth, especially if a principal or an evaluator has those conversations with groups of teachers. Because then they not only learn from the principal, they learn from each other. They learn from one another. Okay, so procedures, instruments. What are the forms, the interview protocols, all the stuff? It's usually in written form, either paper or electronically. increasingly electronic, but the notion is the same. What gets filled out? What gets put in the personnel file at the end of the year? Like, what's the stuff of this system? There are decisions about personnel. Who are the evaluators? Almost always site administrators, principals, APs, sometimes department chairs, sometimes in large districts, curriculum supervisors, and so on. Sometimes peers. Now that's, of course, a whole other kind of conversation to have, right? It's whether the culture around that varies a lot from one place to another, but it's something to consider. But that's what the question is. Who are the evaluators? Timelines. When do things happen? That's relatively straightforward. You just don't want to have, like, for example, teachers being asked to compile a portfolio at the same time that they're doing parent conferences. Or for principals to be doing whatever it is, like a lot of observations, right when budgets are due, and so on. So they're just, those are mostly convenience. And then, of course, there's due process, which tends to be mandated in either statute or negotiated agreement. But I put it here just to remind us we've got to do this well. Okay, now these things are related in the way I said. That is, anything for which you've got an evaluative criterion must have a procedure and instrumentation for teachers to demonstrate it, right? And then you have to have a process. If you're setting up a system from scratch, now if you're a state setting up a system, and I've worked with some state systems or state departments of ed to develop their system, you need a process for that. And it usually involves, or even in a district, right? You need a task force or committee that's representative of everybody whose voices you think should be heard, and provision for the work of that group, whatever the group is, to have its thinking and its preliminary findings shared with everybody, so everybody can weigh in who wants to. In any kind of, unless you lock some people up for 3 days in the summer to design a draft, this takes about a year of sort of monthly meetings and then communication between. Just so you know, at least that's been my experience. It's sort of a year's worth of meetings, and it's fun, actually. I mean, if you like that kind of work. But that's the sort of time you're talking about. And then you need training for evaluators. Now, I need to just pause here long enough and say, no kidding. No kidding. This, in a way, is the linchpin of the system. And because, say we're a bunch of principals in a district, it should never be easier or harder to get a good evaluation in one school than another, just because we're different people and we see things a little differently. So we've had a lot of experience now with training of observers primarily, but evaluators more generally. And the good news is it can be done. The bad news is that it's hard. It's hard. And are you all familiar with something called the MET study, Measures of Effective Teaching? This is this enormous Gates-funded, like everything else in the world, Gates-funded research project around what's good teaching, and they've captured video from, I think, 33,000 classrooms, or actually hours, lessons. Each teacher actually observed or taped like 4 times, so anyway, all of those lessons, though, 33,000 of them, are being assessed using 5 observation protocols, of which my framework is 1. And then they're going to do some correlations with value-added scores from those same classrooms and so on. And try to find out what makes a difference. Now, in order to do that, they had to hire hundreds of raters to watch a video. And we worked with the company that developed the online-only training program. Now, I have to tell you, I was really skeptical about this. I mean, I've designed a lot of training for observers. I have never, ever got it right the first time. And yet the timetable of this project was such that we didn't have time to try it out and revise it. No, you just have to go with it. Anyway, the good news is it's good. It's good. The raters are passing at over 90%. There's a certification test, right? It's a test. You have to pass a test in order to be a rater, because it's so essential that the judgments these people made are right. Well, the same thinking exactly applies to district evaluations. And so what we've found using my framework, there's various ways you can do training, either face-to-face, online, using this, either online, watching like me talk and watching videos of classrooms and then talking about what you see there and what level of performance is represented and so on. And then there's also this online training that, that we're developing. The company, by the way, that did all the video capture and that I'm working and that we worked with for the online training is called TeachScape. I don't know if you're familiar with that. They have this, the way they captured all these 30,000 hours is with a camera. I call it a camera on a stick, actually. It's pretty interesting. You wheel it in and switch it on. You don't need a camera crew and all that, right? And it's panoramic. So if you, like, right? If you're watching a video from one of these classes, you actually watch it on your computer monitor. You put your finger like this and you go this way, and it's as though you're turning your head. And it's pretty powerful, and you can zoom in. I mean, it's really interesting. And in any event, that's what they've used for this training. And so the good news is that we know you can do this. It's hard, but it's good. But it has to be done in some way. That is, that's part of you, departments of ed, or district superintendents being able to say at any moment to their public, everybody who teaches here is good. And here's how we know. We have a system. And we've trained the evaluators so they make consistent and accurate judgments about practice. So that's my most recent experience with that. And so far, the news is good, although it's humbling because it's hard. It is hard. Anyway, there's training for evaluators. And of course, there has to be PD for teachers. Teachers absolutely need to know what are these evaluative criteria, how does the system work, etc. Now, when my framework book was first published, and it was in 1996, I started getting emails, phone calls, letters. I don't know, do you remember letters? We used to get letters. All over the world, mostly in this country, but not only, saying, thank you for writing this book. Now we have our new teacher evaluation system. And I actually had to break the news to them and say, I'm sorry, actually you don't. What you have is this. You have some evaluative criteria and some levels. In any way, you might want to like modify those a little bit. You don't have a system. Until you have all of this, you don't have a system. Now, I didn't start off in teacher evaluation, by the way, just so you know. I was a staff developer, and anyway, I wrote the framework book because it was clear to me that it could help things. Would hopefully make a contribution. But I was contacted early on by a large urban district up near New York, New Jersey. They wanted to revise their teacher evaluation system, and they wanted to base it on my book, and they were asking permission. And so I said, sure, just say where you got it, right? Now, because not everybody does that, you know. They just, anyway, their system needed revision. It was awful. It was top-down, punitive, arbitrary, sort of gotcha system. They revised it and based it on my book, and you know what? It was top-down, punitive, arbitrary. That is, all they did was exchange one set of evaluative criteria for another. They did nothing to change the culture around evaluation. Now, I only found out about this, because see, I hadn't been involved with that. I only found out about it because I got a phone call from National Public Radio. Now, I'm an NPR junkie. I recognized Claudio Sanchez's voice on my machine before he even left his name. They were doing a story. I mean, the teachers were in an uproar, as they should, you know, they should be. I mean, it was a terrible system. And of course, remember I had said, say where you got this? My name was all over it. So, anyway, so I realized that if I didn't sort of help people do this well, my name would be associated with things people hate. So it was purely self-defense. I mean, I could say, oh, I was trying to do good in the world. No, I was just protecting my name. Anyway, but it turned out, actually, to be pretty interesting. It is very interesting work, and I am now convinced that we can do this well. And when we do it well, because we have to do it, when we do it well, it's a powerful, powerful vehicle for a lot of things. Sort of professionalizing the profession, if you like. So it's, oh, wait, hang on a second. Let me just pause here for a second and invite you to take a couple minutes in your state teams, and just give some thought about this. Where are you with this, and do you have any of this stuff in place right now? And then we'll carry on in about 5 minutes.